In this video, I'm about to show you the 10 grated cheese brands in Australia you must avoid and the 5 better ones you should actually be using. Starting with number 10, Coles. Brand shredded tasty cheese. Coles is everywhere. And when a supermarket gets big enough to slap its own label on everything from bread to shredded cheese, convenience stops being the goal and does. Coles brand shredded tasty cheese looks fine in the bag until you actually read what's in it. The first issue is natamycin listed as code 235. Described as a mold inhibitor. What they don't mention is that natamycin is classified as an antibiotic. It's used medically to treat fungal infections. A 2020 review in the International Journal of Food Microbiology raised concerns about regular dietary exposure to natamycin and its potential contribution to antifungal resistance over time. Quiet science that supermarket chains have zero financial incentive to publicize. Then there's the cellulose powder. Every pre-grated cheese uses some, but cheaper private label products use more to compensate for lower quality cheese underneath. Cellulose doesn't melt, doesn't taste like anything, and sits in your gut doing nothing. You're buying filler dressed up as cheese. For a product sold as the everyday budget choice, that's worth knowing before you reach for it. Number 9. Woolworths Select Grated Mozzarella. Woolworths and Coles run this country's grocery supply like a two-man operation, and their home brand products show exactly what happens when real competition disappears. Woolworths Select Grated Mozzarella is built around price and shelf familiarity, and the moment you cook with it, the problems show up fast. Real mozzarella stretches and melts into a smooth layer. What Woolworths Select delivers separates under heat, pulls liquid on your pizza base, and turns rubbery at the edges. That's what happens when lower-fat milk base gets combined with modified starch thickeners to bulk up texture before shredding. Choice Australia testing in 2022 found that several private label mozzarella products showed significantly higher moisture variance between batches than branded alternatives, meaning the bag you buy this week may perform completely differently to the one you bought last month. The ingredient list uses skim milk concentrate instead of full-fat fresh milk. Full fat costs more. Skim concentrate cuts production cost and extends shelf life. The result is a blander, less complex cheese with none of the dairy richness that makes mozzarella worth using. A product designed to hit a price point, not a quality standard. Number 8. Devondale Grated. Tasty cheese. Devondale has spent years building its reputation on Australian dairy heritage and farmer cooperative roots, but reputation and product reality don't always sit at the same table. The Australian Gourmet Traveller Taste Panel in 2023 ranked Devondale's shredded tasty below average for flavour complexity, describing it as lacking the sharpness expected from a mature, tasty variety. Beyond flavour, there's the cellulose issue. Devondale's grated range uses anti-caking agents at levels that noticeably affect melt quality. If you've thrown Devondale grated cheese into a bechamel and watched it clump rather than incorporate smoothly, this is exactly why. Cellulose coating acts as a barrier between fat molecules and disrupts emulsification. What should melt into a silky sauce instead balls up into grainy clumps. For a product sold at a mid-range price point on the back of Australian dairy heritage, that performance gap deserves to be called out plainly. Number 7. Aldi Westaker Grated Cheese. Aldi has loyal followers all over Australia, and plenty of their products genuinely deliver value. But Westaker Grated Cheese isn't one of them. Westaker is Aldi's house dairy brand, and their grated cheese is sourced from rotating suppliers, depending on whatever price contract Aldi has locked in that season. Aldi itself has acknowledged that private label sourcing rotates. What that means for you is that quality control is inconsistent by design. Consumer complaints logged with Product Review Australia across 2023 and 2024 regularly cite off flavours in Westaker Grated. Products' unexpected sourness, lack of cohesion, and a texture that turns greasy rather than smooth when heated. Greasy melt is a direct indicator of an imbalanced fat-to-protein ratio, which typically points to lower-grade milk solids or an inconsistent curing process. Under $6 a bag looks like a win. But when the result leaves your toasted sandwich looking like it's sweated through a workout, those savings feel pretty thin. Number 6. Bega Stringer's Grated Tasty. Bega is one of the most recognizable cheese names in this country, and they've kept that brand warm and familiar for decades. But familiarity isn't a quality guarantee. Bega Stringer's Grated Tasty uses disodium phosphate as an emulsifying agent. Disodium phosphate is approved under Food Standards Australia, New Zealand, but research published in the Clinical Journal of the American Society of Nephrology in 2021 flagged elevated dietary phosphate intake as a contributing risk factor for kidney stress, particularly in adults over 60. For older Australians watching their mineral intake on medical advice, finding phosphate salts tucked into their everyday cheese is not a small thing. Beyond that, Bega uses added flavour compounds to standardise taste across large production batches. When you're processing cheese at industrial volume, natural flavour variation is the enemy of consistency, so they correct for it chemically. That's an honest description of what's happening, even if their marketing never uses those words. The result is a cheese that tastes reliably average and reliably artificial at the edges, not what properly aged Australian milk should deliver. Number 5. Perfect Italiano Grated Parmesan. Perfect Italiano sits on virtually every major retailer's shelves in Australia and has successfully positioned itself as the accessible Italian-inspired choice for home cooking. The gap between that image and what's actually in the container is significant. Real Parmigiano Reggiano is protected by European designation of origin law. It must be produced in a specific Italian region, aged for a minimum of 12 months, and contain nothing but milk, salt, and rennet. What Perfect Italiano sells as grated Parmesan is a domestic blend manufactured in Australia with no aging requirements, no regional provenance, and a formulation that prominently lists cellulose powder and anti-caking agents. A 2023 analysis by CanStar Blue found that Perfect Italiano Parmesan ranked last in its category for authentic flavour among 5 tested brands described as salty and sharp without depth. That's consistent with a product relying on concentrated salt and flavour additives to simulate aged complexity rather than achieving it through actual aging. At over $7 for 100 grams, the value proposition collapses once you understand what you're actually buying. Number 4. Kraft Grated Parmesan Kraft. Most Australians grew up with this on the dinner table, that green canister on the spaghetti bolognese shaken without a second thought. And that's exactly how they want it familiar enough that you stop asking questions. In 2012, a class action lawsuit was filed in the United States against Kraft Foods for labeling their grated Parmesan as 100% real cheese, while independent laboratory testing found the product contained up to 3.8% cellulose filler above what the FDA considered acceptable. Kraft's Australian formulation operates under FASAN standards, but the fundamental composition hasn't changed. The product still contains cellulose powder and anti-caking agents as declared ingredients. The Parmesan-style designation on Australian labelling avoids the protected name precisely because this product couldn't legally claim to be real Parmesan in jurisdictions with stricter rules. Kraft Grated Parmesan also contains potassium sorbate as a preservative. Studies published in Toxicology in Vitro identified potassium sorbate as a potential contact allergen with cytotoxic activity on human cells in laboratory conditions. Not a product that will hospitalize anyone, but a product with a documented history of misrepresentation, loaded with additives, sold under a name generations of families trusted without question. That loyalty is exactly what these companies count on. Number 3. Mainland Tasty Grated Cheese. Mainland is a New Zealand brand with enormous market reach across Australia, and their Grated Tasty is consistently one of the highest-selling shredded cheese products in the country. Sales volume isn't the same as quality though. Mainland uses added culture compounds to produce a consistent flavour profile, regardless of seasonal milk variation. That sounds like quality assurance. It's actually cost management. Instead of sourcing milk consistently enough to produce naturally uniform cheese, they adjust the flavour chemically. The result is reliable, but shallow. It hits the notes of tasty without delivering the complexity of a properly matured vintage. Nutrition professionals contacted by the New Zealand Herald in 2024 noted that Mainland's processed cheese lines carry a sodium content noticeably higher than equivalent products from smaller artisan producers, a direct consequence of using flavour salts to compensate for abbreviated aging. And it's worth noting that Mainland is owned by Fonterra, which in 2013 was at the centre of a major contamination scare involving whey protein concentrate contaminated with Clostridium botulinum bacteria affecting multiple international markets. Fonterra overhauled testing protocols following that crisis, but for a brand that markets on wholesome dairy heritage, the corporate history deserves acknowledgement. Consumers have every right to make decisions with full information. Number 2. Saputo Grated Mozzarella. Saputo is a Canadian multinational that now controls a significant portion of Australian dairy processing following its acquisitions of Warrnambool Cheese and Butter and Murray Goulburn assets. Their grated mozzarella is sold under multiple labels across Australian supermarkets. And the scale of their operation is exactly where the problem begins. When a single corporation processes over 1 billion litres of milk annually in Australia alone, the production model shifts entirely from craftsmanship to throughput. Saputo's mozzarella is engineered around industrial performance metrics: consistent melt for food service, consistent shelf life through preservative use, consistent weight through moisture management. What gets sacrificed is the flavour complexity that comes from slower, smaller batch production. FSANZ data, reviewed between 2020 and 2023, showed that several Saputo processed mozzarella products had elevated moisture variance compared to declared specifications consistent with high speed. Moisture injection, used in industrial shredding to maintain weight targets. That excess moisture is why your homemade pizza comes out wet in the middle despite a properly preheated oven. Saputo's size is their selling point to retailers. It shouldn't be your reason to buy. Number 1. Cracker Barrel Vintage Grated Cheese. Cracker Barrel sits at number 1 not because it's the most dangerous product here, but because it represents the most cynical gap between brand promise and product reality. Their entire identity is built around premium, aged, full-flavoured Australian cheddar. The vintage grated product they sell is the single biggest betrayal of that positioning. Cracker Barrel Vintage Grated is processed from cheese that has been mechanically shredded, coated with cellulose and anti-caking agents, then packaged for extended shelf life with added preservatives. CSIRO Food and Nutrition sensory testing found that the shredding and coating process significantly degrades the volatile flavour compounds responsible for the sharp, complex bite of properly aged vintage cheddar. In plain terms, pre-grating actively destroys the quality that justifies the vintage label. What you get in the bag is a dulled, muted product compared to the same cheese grated fresh from the block at home. That's before the price. Cracker Barrel Vintage Grated regularly retails above $9 per 100 grams at major Australian supermarkets. You are paying a premium for a product whose processing has stripped out the premium quality. The block version, grated fresh at home, outperforms this product in flavour, melt quality, and value every single time, paying more for less, wrapped in premium packaging. That's the kind of corporate thinking that makes people furious, and rightly so. Number 5. Jarlsberg Grated. Jarlsberg originates from Norway and is one of the most authentically produced imported cheeses available in Australian supermarkets, stocked nationally through Coles, Woolworths, and IGA. Their grated range uses cheese made to a protected Norwegian recipe with genuine bacterial cultures and a minimum aging period that produces the characteristic mild, nutty flavour the brand is known for. What makes Jarlsberg worth recommending is the simplicity of their ingredient list. Their grated product contains cheese and cellulose powder, nothing else. No added flavours, no phosphate salts, no potassium sorbate. The cellulose quantity is minimal, just enough to prevent clumping, not enough to interfere with melt. Taste.com.au blind testing in 2023 ranked Jarlsberg Grated first for melt consistency and second overall for flavour among 12 tested products. At approximately $8 per 180 grams, the quality-to-cost ratio actually makes sense, which is something you can't say about most of what came before it on this list. Number 4. Mill-Lel Grated Parmesan. Mill-Lel is produced by Lion Dairy and drinks using South Australian milk, and it is one of the few genuinely good Parmesan options on Australian supermarket shelves that doesn't require an imported price premium. Their grated Parmesan is aged for a minimum of 10 months at their Murray Bridge facility, not the 18 to 24 months of true Parmigiano Reggiano, but meaningfully longer than the zero aging found in most of the products we just covered. That aging matters. Proteolysis, the natural protein breakdown during aging, is what creates the crystalline texture and savoury depth that makes Parmesan worth using. A 2022 nutritional comparison published by Choice found that Mill-Lel Grated Parmesan contained lower sodium per serving than both Kraft and Perfect Italiano equivalents, while delivering equivalent or superior flavour scores. Across their panel, if you're cooking Italian at home and you want something that actually belongs on the dish, Mill-Lel is the honest, Australian-made answer at a price that doesn't require a second mortgage. Number 3. Lemnos Grated Halloumi. Lemnos is an Australian company producing Cypriot-style cheeses using local milk, and their commitment to traditional production methods using sheep and goat milk blends in the authentic Cypriot ratio sets them apart from virtually every competitor in this category. Their grated halloumi product is available through Harris Farm Markets and selected independent supermarkets nationally. It contains 2 ingredients: halloumi cheese and sea salt. No cellulose, no anti-caking agents, no preservatives of any kind. The result is a product that behaves completely differently to conventional pre-grated cheese. It browns rather than just melting, adding a savory, slightly charred note to dishes that no processed shredded product can replicate. Protein content runs approximately 8 grams per 30 gram serve, meaningfully higher than equivalent serves of shredded tasty. For older Australians monitoring dietary protein intake, that's a practical benefit on top of a flavour one. A company making something genuinely different with genuinely clean ingredients, and that deserves to be said out loud. Number 2. Section 28. Artisan Grated. Section 28 is a small batch South Australian producer operating out of the Adelaide Hills, and they are making some of the most technically accomplished cheese available in this country. Their grated range is available through specialty retailers including Simon Johnson nationally and via their own direct online store. It is made from single-origin Adelaide Hills milk, with aging periods between 12 and 18 months, depending on the variety. Section 28 uses raw milk for several of their aged varieties. Raw milk cheese is legal in Australia when aged for a minimum of 60 days, as pathogens are eliminated through the aging process. The flavour compounds in raw milk cheese, particularly the complex lipid derivatives that develop through natural lipolysis, are destroyed by pasteurisation. Pasteurised milk cheese is categorically incapable of reaching the flavour ceiling of its raw milk equivalent. Section 28's grated aged cheddar delivers a depth and regional character that no supermarket product at any price point can touch. At around $14 per 100 grams, it's a considered purchase, but it's the real thing, made by Australians, from Australian milk, with nothing to hide. Number 1. Piangana Dairy Grated. Cheddar Piangana Dairy sits at number 1 because it represents everything Australian cheese can be when quality comes before margin. Piangana is a small family operation in the Piangana Valley of northeast Tasmania, producing cheddar from their own herd's milk in a process essentially unchanged since 1895. Their grated cheddar is cloth-bound during aging, a traditional method that produces a natural rind, allows moisture to escape gradually, concentrating flavour without accelerants or additives. Piangana cheddar is aged for a minimum of 12 months, up to 24 months for their vintage grade. The result is a cheese with complex secondary flavour notes from the wild bacteria present in cloth binding and a fat structure that melts cleanly without releasing excess moisture or pooling grease. Their grated product contains one ingredient, cheese. No cellulose, no anti-caking agents, no preservatives of any kind. Piangana products are available through specialty retailers nationally and direct from their farm gate. At around $16 per 100 grams, you know exactly what you're paying for a family farm, a century-old recipe, Tasmanian milk, and people who genuinely care about what they make. In a market full of bags padded with wood pulp and flavour powder, that's worth every cent.